anyway, so I remember when I was talking to him, and this is where the whole kind of like it had evolved. Like he was like, and I remember just sitting there. It was me and a couple other guys, and we were talking to him. And they were like, "Yeah, that's a pretty good scam, right?" God, what do you think? And I was like, "You're an idiot." He was like, "Well, what would you have done?" And I went, "What I have done?" He said, "I would have." Hey, this is Matt Cox, and it's me and Zach. And we're going to be, we actually got a, I almost knocked that over. What if I had knocked this over right now?
Twice. You've almost knocked it over twice.
I know it's an issue. So I'm all jacked up. So what happened is we'd answered a bunch of questions from viewers. And one of the questions was, are there any scams that you learned about or came up with while you were incarcerated? And the answer is, it's yes and no, but one of the big scams right now, and we both kind of we've talked about this, and Zach's actually done the scam. It's called the tax scam or the drop. But that I've actually have kind of a story of evolution on that scam because it was super prevalent 10 years ago. It's not so much now. But anyway, but I have seen different variations of it from guys coming in prison. But you want to tell how you were running the scam before you were incarcerated?
Right. Well, what had happened was, my wife and I, we were doing a lot of different scams, and someone approached us about, what had happened, what we needed was bank accounts. So I had put out the word that I need someone with a bank account because we want to use their bank account. Well, a friend of ours said, I have a girl that has like 4 or 5 bank accounts. I'm like, awesome. So he goes to introduce us to her. Her name was Tiffany. And when Tiffany and I met, it was like I was on one thing and she was on something else. So when I met up with her, I said, okay, if you have a bank account, I need your debit card, right? And the account number and routing number, and I'm going to deposit this in your account. And then I'm going to do this with it. And we're going to make this money. We're going to split it. So she's like, well, I really don't have an account open with a debit card. And she's telling me, but what I normally do is this tax scam. I'm like, yeah, but I'm kind of focused on getting this, this debit card thing going. She goes, yeah, but when I do the tax scam, I can normally get about $13,000. I get about $10,000 federal and $3,000 from the state. This is up in Georgia. I'm like, yeah, but I'm kind of focused on doing this. Do you have an available account or not?
Yeah, you're discarding her.
Right. So we're talking against each other. So she's like, well, I have this one, but I have to check and see what the PIN number is and if it's still open. So she gives me a debit card. So we part ways, and I tell the guy that sent her, I go, listen, she's on something else. I'm on A, she's on B. Right. So she's on something else, so I don't even know if I can ever use her, right? So about a week later, I'm laying in bed with my wife, and like it hits me. I'm like, that girl said something about making $13 doing taxes.
$13,000.
$13. I've been out too long buying from Burger King. But she said something about making $13,000 doing taxes. I'm like, she said she knew how to do everything. I'm like, why didn't I ask her about that? So I try to call. This is the funny part because I try to call her and she doesn't answer. So I spend the next 2 days calling her about 5 times every day and she doesn't answer. So I have back then I had a spoofing service where I could call you and make it look like
it was coming from another number.
Right. So I had her home number and her cell number. So what I did was I spoofed her and made it look like I was calling from her house. She answered. Like I called her and she didn't answer. I called her and she didn't answer. So then I spoofed it and made it look like I was calling from her house and she answered on the second ring. So when she answered, I just disregarded the fact that I spoofed her.
Right.
And I said, how come you haven't been answering the phone when I call? She goes, oh, I've been tied up and whatever.
Come on.
So I said, well, you mentioned this tax scam. Tell me what it is you need and how it works. So she's saying basically all she needs is someone's social and birthday and a bank account, and she would file taxes for them on their behalf, and it would be deposited directly into the bank account. So I'm like, I've got about 10 or 12 people that I have their social, date of birth, and bank account. She's like, well, oh my God, we could make $130,000. I said, well, cool, because I said, we'll split it. Well, whatever you do, I'll give you half. So she said, well, right now I'm kind of hurting for money. I don't have internet and such and such. But I spent the money. I got her one of the, what is it called? Where you can use the internet anywhere. Hotspot. I bought her a hotspot and a laptop. So I gave her like $3,000, got her a hotspot, laptop, and said, okay, do you have everything you need to file them? So she began filing the income taxes. And lo and behold, about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, 13,000 started coming in religiously.
Right.
Blew my mind. Because when I told my wife about it, she's like, you think it's going to work? I'm like, I don't know, but she's going to do it. So after she did it and they started coming in, then I got very interested in it. So then I wanted to meet with her to see exactly what she was doing. I got the outlay of how much she said she was making, how she got the EIN numbers, and how she was just basically inputting it in and filing the taxes, and the money was coming back. So it's easy as just putting the paperwork in, and they bring the money back. That's how it was back in 2006.
Right. So it basically, I'm not sure this was very clear, just for people that are watching, is essentially what's happening is some guy works at Walmart, right?
Right.
And he makes whatever, let's say $40,000, $50,000. He's paid into the IRS $15,000
right.
in income tax, right? Now, at the end of the year, he files his taxes, and he might get, because he does it legally, he might end up getting $3,000 or $4,000 back.
Right.
Well, what people do is they'll get his information, and before he can file his income tax, somebody will get his information, file a tax return for him with an alternative bank account number.
Right.
And so the IRS, and he'll say, like, I have 6 kids. I bought a Prius.
Right.
I have a house. He'll say all these things so that he gets back the maximum. Instead of the $3,000 he would have typically gotten back, he gets $10,000, $9,000, $13,000, whatever. He gets that
from the feds and state. He
right.
gets money from,
there's no
certain
state, in certain states. Right.
Yes.
Let's say he gets back $9,000, and the IRS direct deposits that money onto a Green Dot card or typically into a bank account or whatever. And so all you have to do is you get the guy's information, you then file, and then of course it's a problem for him because then 2 weeks later he files his taxes. He doesn't know what's happened. The IRS says, wait a minute, we just gave you your money. Right. And now there's an issue. He has to file and say, hey, it was stolen. That's not me. That's not my number. I don't have this. I don't that. So that's an issue. But they call that the drop because they're waiting for the money to drop,
right.
I think, right?
Right. It takes about 3 weeks in tax season.
For it to drop. So at that time,
right.
Now it's way behind. I mean, it's way behind because like I'm supposed to get money back. And I filed mine months ago. I've never gotten my tax return yet. Still, it's way behind. So, but back then, if you file they're false tax returns, they're getting money back. So Zach was doing that, and he was doing that with this girl. And now when I went to prison, I met a bunch of guys. I actually met this one guy who got 15 years. His name was Russell Simmons. No relation to Russell Simmons.
Oh, that makes sense. I thought it was the same guy, but yeah.
So this guy's name was Russell Simmons, and I remember he was there for fraud. He got 15 years, and we talked a few times. And I went to him and I said, "Everything cool?" Oh, yes. Sorry. I went to him and I looked and I said, "Hey, so you were doing the drop?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how's it work?" And I remember he rambled through it real quick. I was like, I said, "Listen, I seriously want to know how does it work? Like not the quick cursory version that you give all these guys to impress them. Like, how did you even get onto it? What's the story?" And he was like, all right. He said, "So here's what happened. He had started a car dealership, and he'd been running it for like 10 years. And he said one day a guy, and it was in a bad neighborhood, a bad area. And he said, so I was buying cars for $2,000 at the auto dealer or at the auto auction. He said I'd buy them for $2,000, $1,500, whatever. So on the average, they'll buy a car for like $2,000. They'll clean it up. They'll sell it for $6,000.
Right.
Some of the cars get lost and they never get payments on them. But some of them they get paid back, whatever. So you're basically buying a car that's worth $2,000 to $3,000 for almost double.
Right.
So he's buying them for $2,000, cleaning them up, selling them for $6,000. And he said people make payments to me, and they typically give him $2,000 down. So they basically cover the amount of money, most of the money that he's got in the car. And they would come in and he said, and they'd buy cars. He goes, well, I've been doing that and I've been doing okay. He said, but one day this guy comes in and like I had a nice like Escalade or something. He goes, it was pretty old. He said, but it was decent. He said, it was going for like 10 grand or something. And he says, and he bought it for like 3. And he said, and I remember when he bought it, he said he didn't think didn't even know he could get rid of it.
Right.
He said, because people just aren't buying cars for that. And he said, I'm trying to sell it for 10. And the guy came in and was like, look, I'll buy it cash. Can I buy it cash? He's like, how much cash can I give you, like without you telling on me? And he was like, I mean, you can give me up to $10,000 cash. And I go, is that not going to be an issue? You're not going to file any forms? He's like, no, I'll just take the money. Right. So he pays the guy. So then he said, no big deal. The guy takes the car. He's great. He said, didn't argue about the price, nothing. He said, then like another guy comes to me 2 weeks later, wants to buy a car an expensive car I had in the lot. And the guy was like, whatever. It's like, it's like whatever, X amount of dollars. And he says, look, how much money can I give you cash? And he's like, huh. So he takes it. He goes, well, I start buying more and more expensive cars to the point where now that my cars are selling for $15,000. Guys are coming in saying, how much money can I give you in cash? And so he starts structuring. It's called structuring. He's like, look, you can give me $9 grand. I'll hold the note for the extra $6 grand. Right. Come in a month and pay it off.
Right.
And then I won't have to report the money, or probably still does, but he doesn't. So the guy comes in and does that. So he said, man, my cars started going from selling cars for $5,000 and $6,000 to where I was selling cars for $25,000 and $30,000.
Wow.
So now he's not buying these little $1,500, $2,000 beaters. He's buying cars that are for 10 grand, for 15. Those guys are coming in left and right with cash. So finally one guy had come in, bought 6 cars or 4 cars or a bunch of cars in 2-3 months.
Right.
And he said, so he comes in and he says, look, I want to buy that car out there. And he looks at me and goes, I'm going to sell you the car, okay? He goes, can you do this? Can you do that? Yeah, I'll do exactly what we did before. He goes, but here's the thing. He said, man, where's this money coming from? It's just you and me. Tell me the truth. He goes, this is drug money, right? I mean, this is the projects. There's projects all around me. He goes, this is drug money, right?
Right.
And the guy goes, nah, man. He goes, ain't nobody selling drugs anymore, Russell. Nobody's selling drugs. He goes, this is fraud money. Hey, real quick, just wanted to let you guys know that I have a book, my personal story. It's called Shark in the Housing Pool, and maybe Colby will put it up or not. I don't know. I also wrote a book about a buddy of mine in prison. His name is Walter Rossini, and it's called Devil Exposed. I also wrote a book called The Program about me going through the drug program in prison. It's practically a cult. And my favorite is Bent about John Boziak being a homeless kid on the streets of Miami that ultimately was one of the most prolific counterfeiters of credit cards in the cyber underground. So check the links in the description. I'll have a link to every single book. And back to the podcast. So Russell says to the guy, just tell me what's going on. What's happening? The guy says, okay, here's what we're doing. He says, we're getting information. And back then when Russell was doing it, by the way, Russell said this guy was going around to women in the projects who didn't have jobs. They're just in the projects. They've got 3 or 4 kids. They don't have jobs. At that point, he said this guy he would buy for a couple $100. He'll buy your information. The girls would give him the information. He would then file. These guys were filing on welfare recipients. They didn't even have to have a job at Walmart or Target or wherever they're working. They don't even have to have a job, period.
Right.
And they're filing, and he said, this guy's getting the money. He's putting it on green dot cards. At that point, it was so open. So he sells the guy the card, that he starts working with this guy.
Right.
Because, by the way, Russell has tons of people, of social security numbers and information, people that have jobs, he's got tons of stuff in the files. So Russell starts working with this guy, but Russell was like, I really didn't want to do my own people. Right. So he does cherry pick a few of them. And over the next year or so, I forget how many millions of dollars he ends up getting.
Right.
But it's a ton. I mean, it's enough to get $15 million on a nonviolent crime for a guy that had never been arrested before. So, oh my God. Well, see here, this is the actual, Yeah, you could, if you wanted to, Colby, you could actually pop the video because there's actually a middle dish. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna send this to you. Yeah, there. So I'm sending it to you. This one, it's where Russell Simmons got arrested. Gosh, this goes on and on. I forget how much is the actual fraud. Oh, he got refunds for. Attempted to make claims for $8.9 million. He got refunds totaling $1 million, basically a little bit over $1.2 million.
Wow.
That's all he got. So what he ended up saying was this, is that he said not all of them came in. Like you'd apply, but they wouldn't all come in. And by the time he started doing it, the IRS, it was becoming rampant in Tampa, and the IRS started cracking down. Like one of the things, first they went to the IRS and they said, look, all these green dot cards, if money's going to this bank, don't do it. Don't send it to them. Remember there was the Russell Simmons card?
Yes.
Well, anyway, this obviously different Russell Simmons. So he said like they started shutting down these prepaid debit cards. They would stop letting you put them on that. He goes, and that hurt it. Then they started shutting down like different types of banks. Then they started giving people PIN numbers. Like you would put in your thing, you worked at FedEx, and you'd send in your taxes and get it back in the next, and then you'd end up getting something in the mail saying, hey, next year use this PIN number.
Right.
So and what's so funny about Russell is he was like, I would call. Like they would send me something back and they'd say, we're not putting the money on the card. You have to call us. He goes, most guys don't call. He would call.
And get them to do it.
Yeah, he'd get on the phone and say, what's the problem? Well, we have some questions. Keep in mind, he had a lot of their information.
Right.
But he also said, I think he started going to he knew other car dealers, and he would go to other, like they were, these small car dealers. He would go to other guys he knew and get information from them, and he started buying information from people that would bring him, hey, I got this many social security numbers and copy of this, and he'd do that. So he was doing it for a while. So anyway, obviously they got him for about $1.2 million.
Right.
And he came to prison. He got 15 years. So he and I were talking. That was one thing that was interesting about the whole tax scam.
Right.
But here's the drop. So here's what got me really thinking, wow, this is amazing. Is that okay? So I started talking to these guys that said when they first started doing it, they would file 10 tax returns and they'd get 8 of them.
Right.
Towards the end, they were like, we're filing 20 and getting 1 to go through, maybe 2. It was that bad. Well, I talked to this one guy. This was the scam I think I've told you about. First of all, I don't remember the guy's name. I wish I did. He was such an idiot. And I remember everybody that talked to this guy was like, how did he pull this off? He's an idiot.
Right.
So what he did was he knew a guy that had filed like whatever. He'd done the drop several times. He'd done several of these tax scams. And he was like, first of all, this guy didn't know anybody that like he didn't have anybody couldn't even figure out how to get someone's social security number. So he thought, I'll do it on myself. So what he did was he actually opened up a corporation in his dead grandmother's name. So he opens it up 1 year, like let's say in December. He waits till then the next year goes by. He waits
the whole year. So he opens up December.
Well, somehow or another, he opened up. It was only a few months later. So let's say he opens up. I don't know when it was.
September and then January.
Yeah, and then a few months later, it's January, New Year.
Okay.
So he goes to a bookkeeper and he says, "Look, the company made this much money. Okay, the company made whatever $400,000 or $300,000, and the company paid me $200,000." And they withheld taxes for this much money. So I need you to file taxes for the corporation. So the bookkeeper asks a bunch of questions and says, okay, and files the taxes. This is obviously simple because he wanted some receipts, wanted this. But a lot of times, like if it's a bookkeeper, will put down whatever you want them to put down.
Right.
Because you're signing it. I'm preparing it, but you're signing it. I'm not saying this is legitimate information. So he explains the whole thing to the bookkeeper. he signs for it, sends it in. So he tells the IRS the company made $400,000, the company paid him $300,000, the company withheld $50,000 or $40,000 in taxes. So once it's filed, they file it. He then turns around and he files his taxes to the IRS and says, I worked for this company. They withheld $40,000 in taxes. You guys owe me $25,000 in income tax return. My income tax return, $25,000. Right. Like he puts down, all this stuff. I got what do you call it? What are this? Solar panels.
Right.
And I'm driving a Prius, and I'm driving everything you can get. He said, if for a tax return, like I bought a new car, there's a tax credit for that this year, and there's this and there's that. He does everything. He gets a check, and he said, literally, I sent it in within a week or two. Bam, $25,000.
Wow.
He was like, I was amazed.
Well, he said he made 400, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, what? No, he said the company made $400,000. He said the company paid him $200,000 and withheld $40,000 and gave him back $25,000.
Okay.
Whatever. Somehow or another, they thought that was reasonable. I don't know. So that was his. He was there he was there for wire fraud against the United States government. I remember that was his charge. Like that was like the charge they hit you with, and it was also tax fraud and there was some other charges. Right. So he got that. I also remember he had my same federal judge. He and I had the same federal judge. Oh. Yeah. And he knew all kinds of stuff about my judge that I was like he was like, oh yeah, I looked into him. I was like, why? Like, what does that change? So he's just kind of an odd guy, but he wasn't that sharp.
Right.
Anyway, so he did that scam, and then the next year, and nothing ever happened. So he opens up like another corporation. Or no, or I think he does the same. He did the same corporation several years in a row. Then he opens up another corporation. So the next year, he says that the corporation. By the way, when he sends in the money when he sent in the taxes for the corporation, he got on a payment plan. Like he told the IRS, "This is the corporation, and it withheld this much money from this employee," and then it tells the IRS, "We plan on paying you back," and you send in like a payment plan.
Right.
Next year, he files for the same corporation, having never
had a payment plan,
never sending in any money, never doing anything.
Right.
So he then files again with the IRS, says that the company paid him $500,000. Company made $1 million, paid him in $400,000 or $500,000, withheld taxes of $100,000, and they owed him $80,000 or something. He said they cut me a check just like that. So they cut him another check.
So he would take the paperwork. He would get a tax, like a CPA to file it. So he would actually
regular bookkeeper.
Right, a bookkeeper to actually file his tax paperwork, which he'd submit to the IRS.
Yes.
So now it's in their system.
Right. So
that he owes or paid that much money in taxes.
That the corporation did.
The corporation.
So a corporation has nothing to do with him. Just told the IRS, I paid Zach $400,000, and I withheld $100,000 in taxes that I owe the IRS.
Right.
And we're on a payment plan to you. Here's our payment plan. But then he never fulfills he never makes one payment to the IRS. He also tells the IRS that the company owes X amount of dollars. Like the company also owes you this much money, and here's a payment plan for that. Never files. Does it for like a couple years in a row. I mean, I'm getting some of the details a little off, but a couple years in a row. Then he closes that corporation. Well, he just stops.
Right.
He just puts it aside. By this point, he's opened another couple corporations. So the next year, he does it again. He did this for about 5 years. 1 year, he said he paid himself like $1.5 million. Like this corporation opened up in like his dead grandmother's name.
Yeah.
Filed. Yeah. In his name. He's doing all this in his name. He's an idiot.
Yes.
They paid $1.5 million in, paid me $1.5, and they owe me, and they withheld $400,000, and you, the IRS, owe me $350,000, and they paid him.
Right.
So signed it himself, everything. This guy ends up with he got like $1 million or something over the course of like 5 years.
Right.
It's ridiculous. So what ends up happening is he then stopped for several years, by the way. So he stopped for several years.
So he's made a few $100,000, so he might be all right.
He's made like almost $1 million or so, like $1 million. He then stops for a few years Now, what actually, he found out this later, that the IRS actually at one point investigated one of the two companies. They actually went and investigated the company,
right?
But they couldn't get a hold of anybody. And they noticed that the company had paid him for like 2 or 3 years in a row.
Right.
I forget what the amount.
Yeah.
But here's the whole thing. We can't get in touch with the company.
Right.
So we have to assume the company did pay you. So the company did pay this guy this much. They're admitting that. And the company never paid us, the IRS, the withholdings tax.
Right.
And then now we can't get in touch with anybody at the company. And you know what? That happens.
Right.
They can't hold it against you, the employee.
No.
The company's admitting that they paid you.
Right.
This is clearly a badly managed company. Doesn't mean we don't owe you the money. They withheld it. They were supposed to send it to us. They didn't. So if you work for Walmart and make $50,000 and Walmart withholds $20,000 and then never pays the IRS the $20,000 they withheld to you, and then you go to file your taxes at the end of the year and say, hey, Walmart withheld $20,000 from me, and now I'm filing for my tax income rebate, and I need $7,000. The IRS can't say, no, they never paid us.
Right.
Well, no. By law, I have to allow them to take the money out.
Yes.
It's not up to them. That's between you and Walmart.
Right.
You owe me the money.
Yes. Because the IRS is presuming everyone's operating on good faith.
Right. So this guy does. So now this guy stops for a couple of years, by the way. But money gets tight. So he files again. Only now he's told a buddy of his about it. So he convinces his buddy to do it too.
Right.
So he and his buddy work for the same company. I think it's the same, but it might have been two different companies. But they file. They then both file to the IRS. Hey, the company made $3 million. The company paid me $1 million. The company paid him $900,000. He gets a check back from the IRS. When he files his tax return, he gets a check back for like $200,000, $300,000. The main guy gets a check back for like $600,000 or something like that. Well, what happens is his buddy, he tells him, look, put the money in the bank. Don't take any money out in cash. Like, keep it there. They're not going to come get the money. Because at this point, he's super emboldened by that he's been getting away with it. He doesn't know that they ever even investigated. He thinks he's found a loophole. He thinks he's brilliant. He thinks he's brilliant and stumbled onto something because he's an idiot. And most idiots think they're brilliant. Most smart people don't think they're that smart. Right?
Good observation.
Yeah.
Good observation.
So what ends up happening is his buddy puts the money in the bank, and I mean almost immediately blows through all the money. He buys. I remember one thing they told me he bought, because I always remember thinking, why would you buy that? He bought an RV for like $200,000 or something like that. He bought like an RV.
Why would you buy an RV?
I don't know. I didn't understand that. I was like, well, I've never wanted to buy an RV. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe he was thinking, well, worst case scenario, I can live in the RV. No, it's titled. They're going to take it.
Yes.
So he buys this RV, and then he went out immediately after buying the RV and starts taking out cash. Well, the bank says this guy, one, has never had more than a few $1,000s in his account at any one time for the last 5 years. Right. He just got a check for $250,000 or $300,000, whatever it was. He immediately spent $200,000. The rest, he's actively coming in, taking it out in cash. And we noticed that the money came from the IRS. And guess what? The IRS, there's a lot of scams going on with the IRS. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to call the IRS. They notify the IRS. The IRS looks into it. The IRS comes. They grab his buddy. His buddy immediately says, oh, my God. I didn't know. It was Tyler. Tyler did it. And he tells on Tyler, or whoever the guy's name is. I don't remember his name.
Right.
He tells on him. They come and they grab him. He gets arrested. Here's the great thing. What was always killed me. Tyler only got hit for $1 million or something like that. Only $500,000 or $1 million. You know why?
Why?
Because the statute of limitations, because he had stopped for 2 years, the conspiracy stopped. So they could only go back 3 years, which was what he had currently done.
Right.
And the 2 years, had he never stopped doing it, they could have gone back the entire 7 or 8 years that he'd been doing it. But he had stopped, so the conspiracy stopped. That was a new charge.
Right.
And because it was over 3 years old, they couldn't get him for the $1 million he'd already scammed the IRS out of. So he got lucky. And I remember thinking...
I think that charge only carries 5 years also. I think they run those consecutive. Because I was locked up with people that had done it in prison, and the maximum he said he can get is 5 years.
I mean, I don't know. Remember, Russell Simmons got 15.
I know. I think they ran 3 of those consecutive.
They must have.
We can look. I can look that up and tell you.
Well, so this guy didn't get much time either, by the way. This guy got less than 3 years. And I remember he was
the guy that told, or Russell?
No, the Tyler, Tyler,
yes.
the guy that got told on. Like his buddy, I don't know what his buddy, probably got nothing. He probably gave back the RV, gave back everything, probably was a small, there was probably owed a little bit of money and probably got, because he wasn't the brains behind the operation.
Right.
So this guy Tyler, I don't forget his name. Anyway, this guy Tyler, he ended up getting like 30 months or something. It was under 3 years because I remember it wasn't enough for him to take the drug program. And at that time you had to still have 3 years remaining.
Okay.
So towards the end,
30 months, I think, is what you.
Right. So he ended up getting like 30 months. He didn't have enough time. Bitched and complained the whole time. They could have given me probation. And don't you love those guys?
6 months. I got to do all this time.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
Talked about the judge and what a scumbag the judge is. He could have this. He could. I'm like, bro, you haven't
Yeah.
And not just that. Here's what's really messed up. Like with the $1 million, he actually bought like 3. Some of the money he spent that he got to keep.
Right.
He opened like 3 Subway franchises. So you actively have franchises out there that you're not going to do. Like that's what the judge was pissed about. Like he didn't want to get back any of the money. So he's arguing with the judge. No, well, you can't charge me. He's like, oh, I know you got lucky. Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, I can give you this.
Right.
Boom. So anyway, I remember when I was talking to him, and this is where the whole kind of like it had evolved. Like he was like, and I remember just sitting there. It was me and a couple other guys, and we were talking to him. And they were like, "Yeah, that's a pretty good scam, right? What do you think?" And I was like, "You're an idiot." What do you mean? He's like, "What do you mean? Like it was great because the IRS, they had no choice but to pay me." Right. I was like, "Yeah, but they had to pay you in your own name. Like you're an idiot. Like you did this in your own name." He goes, "Yeah, but I knew it would be worth it if I did get caught." And I was like, worth it? How's it worth it to go to prison for?
I guess he's talking about the 5 years.
Oh, you mean like the $1 million he got?
Yeah, he got millions and he only had to do maybe 5 years.
Listen, he got super lucky. Like if that had hit, they probably could have given him 10 years. Especially if he doesn't want to give the money back.
Right.
Well, anyway, he was desperately always trying to make himself seem super sharp. Like I really looked into it and I this and I that. But if you talk to him for any length of time, you realize what an idiot he was.
What an idiot.
And anyway, so he was like, well, what would you have done? And I went, what would I have done? He said, I would have run an ad in the newspaper.
Right.
For people, I would have said, anything, free government money being given away, or home loans, or personal loans, or Fannie Mae is now, giving away, $10,000, loans to anybody who under the poverty line or whatever. I said I would have run an ad for $500, and 40 or 50 people would have called me and given me their information because they would have thought they were going to get some loan. Right. Bill consolidation loans, any kind of loan, car loans, government, FHA, anything. You spend a couple grand and get yourself 50 people that give you their call up and give you their information. Right. And he was like, oh, okay, I see. What would you do? What do you mean? I said, well, then what I would do is once I've got all your information, they're going to give it to you on the phone because they think they're applying for a $10,000 loan from the federal government to consolidate their bills or whatever. That, good credit, bad credit, no problem. Like I say, so you get their information. Then I said, you could always go get a bank account in their name. Right. You could always go get a debit card. I mean, go get you could order their birth certificate, their social security card, so I started naming off, and then you can go get an ID in their name.
But not everything is for everybody. Like he seems like he stumbled upon this, and what you're describing is in depth and detail that probably is not something he'd be comfortable doing. I find that
I wouldn't be comfortable doing it in my own name.
Oh yeah, that would.
I mean, that's the problem.
Or he should have found some volunteers.
That's what this was his first attempt to distance himself. Right. Was to do it with this other guy.
Right. Well, not knowing, like now that he knows the feds, I'm sure he'll like, well, I need to get someone to do it in their name, but that person doesn't need to know who I am.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I was telling him, look, I would have gone out and gotten alternative people.
Right.
And I would have, And then with those alternative people, open up online bank accounts or get an ID online. Or you think about it, if you're just talking to somebody on the phone, that person on the phone, you can say, great, oh, you have a driver's license? Do you have a driver's license or an ID? Oh, you have a driver's license in the state of Florida? Great. Can you go ahead and tell me the expiration date? Tell me the issue date? Tell me what's the driver's license number? Right. You can then turn around and go on one of these websites and get a card issued to you. And if I have that information, I can open up a bank account in your name. I don't even have to go in the bank. And you could have done all of this online, and then he could have taken that corporation, he could have bought a shell corp. Then filed for the shell corp on all 40 of those guys, saying these 35 guys made $80,000, $85,000, right. $87,000. You vary it obviously on these guys. These extra 6 guys made 200 and something thousand. This top guy made $1 million.
Right,
then you file for the corporation to the IRS, saying how much the withholding was. Talk about the payment plan, and then file on all of those guys. And I would even vary that. Some of them I would file through QuickBooks. Some I'd file through TurboTax.
Right.
Some I'd file directly with paper, mail it in. All the money would be direct deposited on all these different accounts with these debit cards that aren't green dot cards,
right.
that aren't those prepaid, whatever, Walmart cards, like legitimate banks. Have that money deposited, withdraw all of those funds, and then take that corporation, and I would go and I'd file bankruptcy on the corporation. Because when you go downtown, when you go to the bankruptcy court, you basically walk in there. You can actually pull it off online, where you say, I'm filing. They give you a file number, and then you just fill out these documents and you mail them to your creditors. One of the creditors would be the IRS. So now the IRS is going to wait for when is the court date going to be? And they'll even issue you a court date.
Right. Would you show up for the court date?
Hell no. But you could, here's the thing. To the IRS, it looks like this is a corporation that is extremely, a legitimate corporation was opened.
Right.
They hired about 40 or 50 people. They took the withholdings. They filed their first year of taxes. For some reason, they couldn't make their payments, and they went into bankruptcy. Then they never finished the bankruptcy. That happens a lot. We owe all these people this money, and they pay them.
Right.
Look, at any given time in the United States, there's literally between 10 and 100,000 companies that are behind on their payroll withholding taxes.
Right.
That's not an uncommon thing. No. There are some companies that are or like $10, $20 million behind on their payroll withholding.
And that's natural for them.
Right. And they get on. Some of them, I don't know if you know this, sometimes they can actually not pay their employees, withhold the money, then go to the IRS and negotiate what they owe the employee for the...
I've seen it. There's commercials for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, for a corporation, for individuals, there's definitely those if you owe the IRS less than $10,000 or no, more than $10,000 come to us.
And they'll consolidate it. They'll talk to them.
But that's common for corporations too.
Yes.
So you're telling me that I withheld $1 million in federal income tax, didn't pay it over to the IRS. You guys then paid $800,000 back to the employees, and I can now go to you and say, look, I know I owe you $1 million, and negotiate with them to pay them $300,000 back. The IRS is $500,000 in arrears. They're now in the hole. Yes. And you're going to let me continue as a corporation? Absolutely. Like that happens.
That happens. It's true.
I know because I know guys that were in the process of doing that, and the IRS got tired of it and just filed charges against them. But it does happen.
It does happen.
Because I know the same guys had done it multiple times with different corporations. So this is something that happens. The bottom line is that way the guy could have been filing 40 tax refund, the drop, could have been filing 40 of them and gotten all 40. And the IRS wouldn't think those people had done anything wrong. They think the corporation had done something wrong, and the corporation went into bankruptcy and never completed the bankruptcy, and that happens.
That's true. I think it wouldn't matter either or, whether he did the 40 people or if the same amount is true. Like in my...
You think you could have done it with like just 2 or 3 people?
Yes. In my experience of all the things that I was doing, I ran across some IRS checks that were like 190. I think the biggest one I saw was like over $500,000, and it was to a person. So, I mean, I just think it's like it shouldn't be him, but he doesn't have to have 40. He could have 6.
Right.
And whatever he claims to be making. I think it's got to be something to like going to a bookkeeper. I think you'd have to know how to do the books yourself. Yeah, I think a bookkeeper would be like, you made what? Do you have any receipts? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'd be scared they'd report me.
See, to me, like if it was me, like, I mean, I literally, for the corporation, I would have a website. I'd manufacture receipts. I would have leases. Like, I would do everything fraudulent to create the look that this was completely 100% legit. That's what I'd bring to the bookkeeper. Like, they would be like, okay, you spent how much in this and your bank accounts and this. The nice thing is I can fabricate all of that stuff.
Right.
So they would look at it and they would look at it and they'd be like, wow, this is...
For the bookkeeper.
The bookkeeper, and then because the bookkeeper would then file it, because I want the bookkeeper to be secure, right, and feel confident. But I'd also be like, okay, look, he had a website, so that if the IRS ever looked into it, like there is a website. Keep in mind too, if you do the math on this and you make $500,000 on these refunds, it's worth it to pay an attorney to file the bankruptcy. So now if the IRS
the bankruptcy, yes.
Right, the IRS goes and says, okay, look, you're the attorney. I am the attorney. I talked to the guy 3 or 4 times, and he mailed me this stuff, and he mailed me this, and mailed me that. He never did mail me this or that. We never did end up going to court. He stopped returning my phone calls. I don't know what to say. Like, the IRS has got to be like, yeah, that does happen. The IRS, what I don't want the IRS to be thinking is fraud. I want them to be thinking somebody opened a corporation. They ran it for about a year. They couldn't pay their bills. They tried to get on a payment plan. They hired an attorney. They filed bankruptcy. They never completed the bankruptcy because, let's face it, the guy's broke. He's starting his life over. He just tried to walk away.
Right.
I know many people when I was doing mortgages, and people were like, I'd be like, do you have a bankruptcy? And they'd go, well, I started, like, I had more people start bankruptcy than ever if I had them go through it. Like, I had, if I've talked to...
That's how long that stuff stays on your credit, too.
Right. Well, if I talked to 50 people that said, about bankruptcy, like literally 40 of them were like, I started it. Well, what does that mean? Well, I started it, and they give you these letters that you mail to your creditors. Well, the creditors stopped calling. And so I never followed through with it. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, people stopped calling. I stopped paying. And then after about 3 or 4 years, I started getting credit card offers in again. I started filling out the credit card offers, and I got new credit cards. And I just kind of forgot about it. So I never completed it.
Right.
And you're like, what? And they never came looking? No. Because that's what happens with Capital One. You owe $3,000. We got something from the bankruptcy court. They're waiting for the court date.
Right.
It never comes.
Right. That allows them to cash the debt and write it off for profit and loss. So.
Yeah. So at that point, and eventually the person doesn't do it because eventually it kind of falls off their credit.
Right.
It doesn't affect them, so they don't follow through. And what was bothering them the most was the fact that they were getting these calls. Well, so it's the same for a corporation. The guy that owns a corporation, if the corporation went under and he's made no money and he's now claiming bankruptcy, and the lawyer's asking for more money, he doesn't have it. He's like, what am I doing? Like, this is the corporation's problem.
Right.
I'm leaving. I'm going to get a job at Ford. My corporation that I tried to open didn't work out. It went under. I had a bunch of employees. I'm going to go get a regular job.
Yes.
And that's what happened. So anyway, like to the IRS, that would look extremely legit. And then this guy could move on. They're not going to launch this massive investigation because this is common. So I was explaining that to him, and I was like, that's what I would do. And he was just like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, but think about it, bro. You could have a website, like everything about it that they could check. Phone numbers issued, website, everything.
It would smell legitimate.
Right. It's not hard to make it appear legit. So listen, we had that conversation multiple times. He was like, God, man, I hate talking to you. Hate talking to you. And I was like,
cover all angles.
I mean, yeah, but how many times did we sit around and just sit there and talk about scams over and over and over?
Too many.
But yeah, that was that.
And now we're out here talking about it. So,
but the tax, like, what's something funny? The tax scam has turned into the PPP loans.
Yes.
And then eventually,
my God,
it's outrageous.
Yeah, that was in. I think they just flooded the hoods with money.
Yeah.
I think they just give all the poor zones some bread that they used to give rich people. I don't know what the hell's going on.
There'll be another scam.
Oh yeah.
There'll be another one. There'll be massive. They'll come in. There's always going to be these scams.
Yes.
There'll be.
Yes.
Yeah, you're like, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You got to start. You got to remember to talk into.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Not
yes.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's always like that. You know, another scam that was like that was like when the entire economy was crashing. There were tons of people doing they were doing refi scams or doing loan modification scams or doing. There was,
wherever the government shot money, that's what they did.
Yeah, they jump all over it and come up with some kind of scam.
That's true.
So, are we good? You think?
Yes, because I am super sleepy.
Yeah, you're falling asleep.
Oh.
Rough night. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about your night.
Long night. I am tired.
We should be talking talking about Zach's night.
I should only do. Yeah, well, that might have me awake, but I should only do 2 hours.
All right. Hey, if you like the video, do me a favor and subscribe. Hit the like button. Make sure you turn on the notification bell. Share the video and leave a comment for the algorithm. This is Matt Cox signing off, and this is
Zach saying bye.
All right. See ya.